let's move on to our next item, which is the winter athletic summary. So, Jackie, please step up.
Thank you for allowing me to report on the winter athletics. And as you saw tonight, we had a small picture of some of the athletes that were honored by accomplishments that they had throughout the winter season. I think that that's just a small picture. Obviously, the team's success is one of the things that we would like to have a little further on in the athletic state competition. Didn't happen as much this year, but the individuals certainly worked hard towards their goal. In your packet for athletics, you have your cover sheet, which discusses the summary and also the winter athletics pay to participate comparisons for the last 5 years. And the first document that you can look through is the highlights of our winter athletic program, which I'll go over just briefly, and including girls and boys basketball, competitive cheerleading, competitive dance, girls gymnastics, boys swimming and wrestling. Included our highlights of each thing as far as state series and all conference in that. And then also to note that 2 of our athletic teams in the winter do not participate in the Metro Suburban Conference because they don't offer it. And that was boys swimming and girls gymnastics. They compete in an independent conference format. The next document that talks about the pay to participate goes through each season. And the following table down below shows our participation for the last 5 years with enrollment and number of athletes that participated this past winter, in previous winters, and we're sitting about 15.8%, almost 16% of our student athletes that participate in the winter. Some of the, to note on the bottom, some of the significant increases we had in participation were in boys swimming. New coach had a good turnout this year with 10 more boys in the program. And our wrestling program had 28 more participants, boys and girls, in the program this year over the previous year. Most of the other sports remained fairly stable, with a couple that had a decrease, slight decrease, and one more of a decrease was in our girls gymnastics program. And we truly believe that this is a temporary thing that's happened. And I know that was one of the questions the board had in regards to why the big decrease in girls gymnastics. If you look at our numbers in the program, from the previous year, from 27 down to 11, I think one of the things that was discussed with the board previously, when we hired our 2 coaches from the feeder program, they will build the program because they're working with these athletes before they get to us through our feeders. And I think that's going to increase our numbers. But in the past, the rigor wasn't as high for the girls, and also attendance wasn't being kept. So girls were coming and going as they please. So now a good attendance policy, they're expected to be there, they're more competitive. So I think you're going to see a pretty nice positive change in direction for the girls' gymnastics.
Can you stop there?
Sure.
I'm very biased when I hear these kinds of things. It's very easy for any coach to say, I only want to coach the best athletes. If a swim coach does it, they can, with 9 swimmers, cover the team for sectional and state. But that's not a way to develop the program or to provide the opportunities which the board feels very strongly about. So, you know, the average number of participants in gymnastics for the 4 years before this were 28, and we dropped to 11. It seems like we only wanted to cater to the top athletes. I mean, you know, again, so there's more rigor or whatever, but, you know, swimming went up too, but really it's not more than what the average was. It's more than last year, but not more than the average over the 4 years. So I get concerned when I hear, well, there's a new coach and they want the program to be better, and the way to make the program better is somehow cut it by almost 60% of how many participants.
Well, you didn't hear me say that, though. That's what you're assuming. What I did say was the reason why the attendance is different is because in the past 27 athletes were in the program,
right,
maybe only 11 showed up to practice.
Okay.
So now There's no one being cut from the program.
Okay,
That's not happening. What happened was, the girls that came out, there were a couple that no longer wanted to participate in the program. That happens. You get a little bit of attrition
Sure.
due to athletes finding it's not for them. So a couple fell by the wayside due to that. But of the girls that came out, that's the true picture of what probably you would have had last year.
okay.
But you're showing 27 because attendance wasn't being kept accurately. You know what I mean?
Not really.
Okay, well, you had 27 athletes last year, but maybe only 11 really were participating. 11 are showing up on a regular basis and participating, where this year you have 11 athletes in the program that are exactly participating.
So
And
you
I
get
think
kids
that's
paid to
reflected
participate.
in the
Correct.
fees collected as well. So if you look at last year for girls gymnastics, they had 27 students participating, but they only collected a little over $2,000, which means that most of those students weren't attending practice on a regular basis and weren't necessarily
Well, if they
considered
don't-
part of the team.
Unless they get waived, if they don't pay their fee or sign up, they're not even supposed to go to practice, are they?
Or he turned in that he had, at that time, the coach turned in that he had this many students participating and
But again, so then you see another thing then why I push this sometimes, then we reported how many students participated last year, right? Because we have a rule, you either pay, you get a waiver, you get on a, and you're not even supposed to be allowed to practice if you don't do that. So if only 11 paid, there were only 11 in the program, there weren't 27.
No, and
Right.
what I'm hearing is it was loosey-goosey, and we
Correct.
didn't do a good job of keeping track and getting the money or anything else.
we were averaging.
And we're squaring that up, is that right? Mayor?
Correct.
You're
We're
seeing a true
averaging.
picture of what we have right now.
The other important thing to consider as you're looking at participation over the years is in 2011-12, which is the highest year and highest percentage of participation, that's the year when the participation fee was $75 versus the new structure, which is $200 for the first sport and $150 for the second sport. And so I think that's also why sometimes for some of the sports you see a decrease from 2011-12 to 12-13.
We also have the number of wave students decreased by almost 300,
Which is fine.
300%.
Yeah, we have some WAVE students. We also have a couple on the Colt Grabowski scholarship that was offered, approved by the board last year, I believe.
Well, that's helpful to know that it's, the students the participant weren't actually cut. They either had to show up and pay or they weren't allowed on the team, which is what they're supposed to do, right?
Correct.
But can you, on girls' basketball, because we have 4 sides, right?
4 teams, yes.
4 teams, and
Correct.
usually what do we carry, 12 or 14 girls on a girls' basketball team?
Yeah, now I know that you asked at a previous
I'm-
meeting in regards to the maximum amount that
Yeah.
programs could handle.
That was
Yeah.
Gary, I think, but okay.
Okay, I know it was asked.
That's
the
okay.
board- The board had asked. And that, I think in that program, and I know that Art did the survey last year, in that program, the amount that they came up with was a maximum of 52 that
Mhm.
they could possibly handle in that program. Typically about...
Because there's an A and a B in the
There's
freshman.
a freshman A and B, there's a JV and a varsity, correct?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I know right around 48 is probably about the most they can handle with 12 per level. And in my talking with the coaching staff in girls' basketball, they felt that, and quite frankly, they had the same amount of girls come out this year. Our numbers are down. Pretty much, girls' basketball numbers are down. I think I talked about this at the last meeting. Club sports is kind of affecting the amount of girls we're able to pick from. So in that regard, their numbers are down for tryouts, but they felt that in previous years, even though they were up around 48 student athletes, they weren't giving them the maximum amount of participation time that they could do.
Okay.
They were getting very minimal time, and they felt like in this regard, they tried to keep a truer picture of the amount of athletes that could, get some significant playing time. So our ideas will be going forward at the varsity level would probably have the lesser amount of student athletes participate, but the freshmen A and B, where wins and losses aren't critical, that's where we'll increase our numbers. So
Okay.
I think you'll see that.
One of the suggestions you had made is trying to implement one of your past practices that you talked with Kristen and I had briefly was implementing a minimum and a max. So
Correct.
you want to make sure that those freshman lower level teams.
Correct, and that's what I'm saying. We want to make sure we have at least a minimum of 12 to 14 athletes on a basketball squad. on the lower level where the wins and losses aren't as critical. And the varsity obviously will be more on the lower range. So,
Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep,
Question.
yes.
Do you think that the scores might also be a little lower because we've brought back some of the activities that we didn't have? Like we have the spring musical, and we've brought back several activities in the last 2-3 years that students may have always wanted to go to, but they weren't there, so they did a sport. Now they're back.
Right. I've seen and I've talked to coaches, a school of our size and a school that I came from of our size, you'll see a lot of students that participate in many things. So we have allowed student athletes to participate in other programs, and we work with those clubs and activities to do that. So you do see kids being pulled, because they want to do both, and it's tough. So I know in the dance program, the numbers were down a little bit, and some of that is due to some of the girls choosing to either be in orchestras or being in the dance program. So we're hoping that we can kind of get more of those kids to do both again, to build those numbers back up in the future.
Well, I think our goal is participation. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a sport if they're in a club.
Correct.
And so I think when we look into the sports, we need to take into account that maybe our club participation has increased. So we shouldn't beat ourselves up right away because our sports are lower
Right.
if our club participation has increased.
Any other questions on this side? Any questions on this side?
Just, do you want, you came from a different school, do you, and Kristen, you commented on the pay to participate, we usually ask, do you think the pay to participate is having a negative effect on participation?
The place that I hear it most, in the school I came from had it also, is your second and third sport athletes. That's where you'll see that if I'm not really that enthusiastic, it's not my main goal, you'll see them maybe cutting back and not doing as many second and third sports. And, so it does play a little bit of a piece to it.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
All right, thank you, John.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.